Good evening. I'm calling the regular meeting of the University Place City Council for Monday, October 19th, 2020 to order. We are conducting our meeting remotely in compliance with the Special Open Public Meetings Act rules issued by Governor Inslee's emergency order. City Clerk, can you please conduct the roll call?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Figueroa.
Present.
Councilmember Keel.
Councilmember Keel, present.
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee.
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, present.
Councilmember McCluskey.
Councilmember McCluskey, present.
Councilmember Fleming.
Councilmember Fleming, here.
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington.
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, present.
Mayor Bellisi.
Mayor Bellisi, here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, may I ask Councilmember Fleming to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Before we begin our meeting, I would like to remind us all of the special rules that we have that are conducting this meeting. First, participation in public comments and public testimony on any public hearing items will be accepted by the following methods. One, written comment and testimony will continue to be accepted by email. Comments received before 5:30 deadline will be electronically provided to City Council for their consideration. Two, subject to technological limitations, the Council will also accept telephonic comments or testimony by calling the number listed on our agenda, 1-509-342-7253, conference ID number 109-871-215#. For the members of the public who are calling in, please be advised that we will take your call in the order received. To ensure order, your microphone will be muted until you have been recognized to speak. You will be recognized by the last four digits of the telephone number you are calling from. At that time, you will be asked to unmute your microphone by pressing *6. Secondly, for council members, as a reminder, as with our previous remote meetings, we will continue to use the round robin method in the sequence showing on the speaking and voting chart that has been provided to each of you to ensure order of our meetings and that everyone has a chance to speak. So thank you very much. At this time, may I have a motion to approve the agenda as provided?
Mayor Bellisi, this is Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, and I move approval of the agenda as distributed for October 19th.
Okay, I have a first. Do I have a second?
Councilmember Keel, I second.
Okay. Do I hear any objections to approving the agenda as submitted? Okay, seeing none, the approval of the agenda passes unanimously. Thank you. This evening, we are honored to have a presentation from our Police Chief, Greg Primo. I believe he is going to be introducing to us some public safety officers that both us on the council as well as our public might be interested in. So, Chief, the floor is yours.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, council members. Thanks so much for giving me a few minutes tonight. I know you have a busy agenda, so I do appreciate you making some time for this introduction. Tonight, I'm introducing you to two of our newest officers here in University Place. We had hoped to do this months ago, actually, but you know, as different things pop up and schedules are difficult and whatnot, now has come the time. And there's also another reason that we're doing it, not just because they're new, but they've been doing some outstanding work, and I wanted to highlight the two of them for some work that they did just last week as well. Our two officers are deputies Shauna Surfling and Sydney Davis, which I believe they are online with us. They can take their cameras and turn them on if they'd like. I'll let them introduce themselves just really briefly as well, but again, highlighting some work that they've done. Just last week, we had a citizen call in a suspected car prowl over off of Grandview near the Chambers Bay area at about 3:30 in the morning. Sydney and Shauna are 2 graveyard deputies working out here, just the 2 of them. 2 of our 4 that are assigned to graveyard. So this shift, it was just the 2 of them. They responded to the area quickly, and Sydney was able to locate the suspect vehicle several blocks away, and go ahead and initiated a stop as that vehicle tried to take off from her. She was able to keep up with it, make a stop. They were able to get one person into custody, another person fled on foot, but we were able to, take one person in custody, take control of the vehicle, do a search warrant on it, and recovered a lot of stolen property. In fact, there was 21 victims of property within that vehicle. So when we talk about car prowls, I think everybody in University Place, certainly those of us on the police side, are aware of how much of a problem this is that we face with thefts from vehicles. And if there's one incident, we just know that suspects don't just commit one. Unfortunately, it's just kind of one of those things that they're very prolific at, and really hit a community pretty hard. They can go in one night just hitting multiple locations. So anytime we're able to make an arrest and recover some property, we know it's making a big difference in addressing some of those problems. So again, if they're on here, I was just going to have them say hi and quickly introduce themselves. They want to do their camera. I don't know if they're on. I can't see them, so hopefully they're there. I'll let Sydney go first if she can.
Okay. Hi, I'm Sydney Davis. I've been in University Place, placed in University Place since April. No. When was it? Here?
Time has gone by.
Yeah, the end of last year, I think.
September of last year, working the graveyard shift. And I've been with Pierce County Sheriff since 2015. I started at the jail, and then in 2017, I switched over to the patrol side.
Okay. Thanks, Sydney. Shauna, you there?
All right, I'm here. Hi, I'm Shauna Surflane. First, I want to start off by saying thank you guys and allowing me to be here tonight and inviting me into your meeting. Hopefully one day I can meet you guys all in person and shake your hands. I've been with the department for about 4.5 years. I started at the jail as well as Sydney did. And I was there for about 5 months before I came to the patrol side. I started in UP in December of last year, so it'll be almost a year since I've started in UP. I'm also on the bike patrol team, and that's pretty much all I got. I also wanted to end it by saying thank you guys for all your support. I know you guys have done a lot for us, especially in the last few months. This year's been tough, and I know myself and the rest of the department appreciates you guys, so thank you.
Thank you.
I definitely think that we are very thankful for your support, and especially with Chief Primo and everything that he does for us and our little kind of tight-knit department.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you so much.
Welcome aboard. I thought I had seen some female patrol deputies out when I've walked the area late at night. I live here in town center, so I oftentimes walk by the police station, so it's nice to have you guys on board.
Thank you.
Look forward to actually meeting you in person.
Okay,
Thank you.
And
Great.
Congratulations on the good work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Have a good evening, guys.
Yeah.
Our next item on the agenda is a public comment section. As of 5:30 this evening, we have received no emails, and I understand we also have no public on our meeting this evening, so we will move on to the next item. It's our consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve or amend the consent agenda as proposed?
Mayor Belisi, this is Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, and I move for the approval of the consent agenda as proposed.
Okay, I have a first. Do I have a second?
Councilmember Keel, I second.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Are there any objections to approving the consent agenda as provided? Okay, seeing none, the consent agenda is approved unanimously. Thank you. Okay, this evening we're having our first we're having the biennial adjustment next on our agenda for the 2019-2020 biennial adjustment. I will ask that our Finance Director Leslie Blaisdell come forward with her staff report. Ms. Blaisdell.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Leslie Blaisdell, Finance Director. Tonight, it's necessary to do end-of-year adjustment to the 2020 adopted budget to appropriate the additional CARES Act grant funding of $496,350 that was accepted by the City Council on October 5th. The total adjustment to the general fund is $496,350, and the budget adjustment also includes an adjustment to the IT Internal Service Fund to allow the expenditure of $250,000 of those funds that are being spent from that fund. We have a public hearing tonight to allow the public to comment on this, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Blaisdell. Are there any comments or questions regarding this presentation? No comments, just questions. Okay, not hearing any. This is open for public comment, but again, we have not received any email, nor do we have any public here this evening to comment on that. So our next item on the agenda is council consideration. Do I have a motion to approve the budget adjustments as provided by staff?
Mayor Belisi, this is Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, and I move approval of the budget adjustment as provided by the staff this evening.
Okay, I have a first. Do I have a second?
Councilmember Keel, I second.
Okay, a first and a second. So it is now open for discussion. Are there any comments regarding the proposed adjustments this evening? Okay, let's see. I did say we were using the seating chart. Sorry, I'm messing myself up here. Councilmember Figueroa, do you have any comments? You are muted, sir.
Okay, Councilmember Figueroa does not have any comments at this time.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Keel.
Great, thank you, Mayor. I just want to say thanks to Steve Sugg and his team for their work on the COVID special funding and the reason for this budget adjustment. I know we've talked about this before at an earlier presentation, but I just want to say it again here during this budget adjustment. Staff did a fantastic job at both rounds. And what I've heard from the business community when I've been out and about, they've been just over backwards thankful for the work they were able to do. You know, it didn't answer all of the problems that they had, but it certainly cut into a lot of the things that they were experiencing. I hadn't had the privilege to talk with any families directly, but the reports that I get back from the contractor that worked with us to put that out was all positive. So great job. I feel really, really good about all this work. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Keel. Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, do you have any comments at this time?
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, I have nothing to add that hasn't been said. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember McCluskey, do you have any comments at this time?
Well, I'm very grateful for the gift that we're getting with the additional CARES funding. I think our citizens will really appreciate that and benefit from it. And I also would like to echo Councilmember Keel's sentiment that the staff is doing an amazing job. Now spend all the money before the deadline. I don't want to give any of it back. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Fleming, do you have any comments at this time?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My only comment is, again, I think we're extremely fortunate to receive this funding, the additional funding for CARES. But what I really want to do is put an accolade out to the city staff, because not only have they looked at what we have done in the past as a council in reaching out to the community, I really applaud them for really looking beyond that and taking a deep dive into the community to see who we by inadvertently left out, and trying to be very inclusive of those populations. So, thanks to the city staff for really taking that on without any other type of feedback from the council. That's good leadership at the city level for that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fleming. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, do you have any comments at this time?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, just briefly, I do. Part of it is to echo what everyone has said. It's a unique experience in my time, at least, to be able to provide money to citizens in such a way and to be passing through the city the funds that we have, a portion of the funds, roughly half, that we received from COVID, funding from the state and federal government ultimately. Really, I think our citizens can put that to good use. I know they can, and I'm very pleased that our staff has been able to figure out the mechanisms quickly to be able to do that in the short time frame they've had to respond. So it's a good job, and I'm very pleased with the outcome. We should approve the budget to provide for it, of course. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all my council members for saying exactly what I was thinking myself. So again, thank you staff for working cooperatively with our business leaders as well as our citizens and our nonprofits to determine the needs that were out in the community in regards to CARES. With that, I don't believe we have any other items to discuss at this time. So I will ask our city clerk to conduct the roll call vote on the 2019-2020 biennial budget adjustments.
Councilmember Figueroa,
Yay.
Councilmember Keel,
Councilmember Keel, aye.
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee,
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, aye.
Councilmember McCluskey,
Councilmember McCluskey, yes.
Councilmember Fleming,
Councilmember Fleming, aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington,
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, aye.
Mayor Bellisi.
Mayor Bellisi, aye.
The motion carries, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Okay, our next item on the agenda is our proposed 2021-22 biennial budget. This is our first public hearing. There will be no consideration from council at this hearing. It is just a staff report and public comment at this time, and any clarifications that the council may need. So with that, I will turn it over again to our Finance Director, Leslie Blaisdell.
Thank you. So we wanted to make sure this year that the public had ample opportunity to comment on the proposed budget. We scheduled 4 opportunities. The first was on October 5th. We allowed public comment. Tonight is the first of 3 official public hearings. The remaining 2 will be on November 2nd and November 16th. The budget document is available for viewing on the city website, in addition to being included in packet materials. The 2021-2022 proposed biennial budget is a balanced and conservative budget that assumes a continuation of the 2020 levels of service to the community. It is balanced. We like to say that. We continue to be conservative with our revenue projections, and it does include the statutorily allowed increase in the city's ad valorem property taxes in each year of the biennial budget. We'll have our first study session on that later this evening. Tax revenues in 2021 are expected to increase from the 2020 year-end estimates, as we project that we'll see some recovery from COVID-19 revenue losses. The expenditure budget is status quo and continues our 2020 service levels. We've included a modest level of inflation on the expenditure side. It also includes a 1.5% COLA for all staff in 2021. There are some new, mostly one-time items included in the budget that total $611,935. Again, it's balanced and conservative, and we'll continue providing the best service we can, meeting all our contractual, legal, and debt obligations. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Blaisdell. At this time, are there any council members that have clarifications or questions in regards to the budget? I will go through the roll call to see. Councilmember Figueroa, do you have any questions regarding the budget?
Councilmember Figueroa does not have any questions regarding the budget.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Keel.
Councilmember Keel, I have no questions now, but I'm sure I'll have some maybe next time.
Okay. Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, do you have any questions regarding the budget presentation?
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Councilmember McCluskey.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I have just a couple of questions. I wanted some clarification on the Kobe fireplace as to what we need to do to repair it, or if it's really feasible to continue a fireplace at Kobayashi since it's never been used. It could be a decorative pretend fireplace just because the grid on it is so beautifully done. And the other question I have was in regards to University Place School District's pool analysis on page 88 as to why we might be doing a pool analysis at Curtis High School. Is it for community accessibility? I don't know. So I'd like to know why. And the RCO grants for Cirque Playground and Cirque Park, I know it was noted in the budget, but I'm not really sure if we really received it. So if it's a placeholder, I understand the hopefulness of it to keep it there. And then on page 99, it seemed like there was a lighter type and a formatting where the first letter of an indexing was displaced because of the formatting on that. So just an FYI. And my last question is the salary ranges. Does that include the 1.5% COLA within the ranges, so that it shifts along with the cost of living increases, or has that been standardized in the 2019-2020 budget? Is that the same? Is in the appendix?
Yes. Okay, I'll start at the top of your questions regarding the Kobayashi fireplace. It's listed as a restoration, but staff is still trying to determine whether it should be restored or taken down, or as you said, turned into something decorative. It has never been used. We don't really want fires down in that area, but it is deteriorating, and there's fear that there could be some liability, that could cause injuries as that deteriorates. So the final determination as to what the final product will look like is still being worked out to figure out what we can do with that piece down there. You referenced on page 88 the UP school district analysis. That is from a prior year, so those amounts in there are the life to date. So it was something done probably many years ago. There's nothing in the current budget for a pool analysis. This document that's included shows all of the projects that have been life to date. The RCO grants, we have applied for them. They are in the budget as a placeholder because we won't have any answer as to whether we receive those till later this year, possibly early this year. Currently, I've received word from Gary Cooper that we're ranking about number 13, so we're not sure that we will receive those funds, but we wanted to appropriate them should that grant come through, so that we can also appropriate the Parks Impact Fee matching dollars. On page 99, thank you for pointing that out. We'll make sure that gets corrected in the final document after everything's approved. It looks like it just cut off the one edge when we brought it in from the Excel spreadsheet. And lastly, the salary ranges in the appendix, that does include the 1.5% COLA. So that is the range based on the new figures.
All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Fleming, do you have any comments at this time, or questions, I should say?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do not at this time. I'll reserve for later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, do you have any questions at this time?
Thank you, Mayor Bellisi. No, I don't have any questions at this stage. I'll save those for a little later on during our study session. Thanks.
Okay. I have no questions at this time myself. I know we have not received any public comment via email regarding this issue, nor has any public logged into our meeting at this time, so that our public hearing on this matter for this evening is closed. There still will be opportunity for the citizens to have additional comments and opportunities for public hearings. I believe it's 2 more before we pass our budget. So at this time, the next item up for our agenda is the City Council and Council comments and reports. May I ask our City Manager, Steve Sugg, to appear on the screen?
Yes,
Mr. Sugg, the stage is yours.
Mayor, thank you, Mayor, members of the Council, City Manager Steve Sugg. Well, I'm pleased to report that $2,000 of CARES funds was allocated for a cold storage rental trailer to our church, which is distributing USDA fresh food box. They actually started today, and they will also be doing so on Monday, the 26th at 9 o'clock in the morning. The cold storage trailer will enable continued distribution of the fresh food boxes this week to people who need it. So it's a huge return on investment for a small amount of CARES funds. And keeping in that theme on CARES, and by the way, I want to thank the council for their, go back to the July 6th meeting where you really made some, you didn't linger on this distribution of funds. You approved the legislation so we could expedite this and staff could be quickly. So I want to thank you for the work at the policy making level to get those CARES funds out. And then, of course, the staff team was fully spring loaded, ready to move into action, and they have. So thank you. And thank you for those kind words earlier. So as of October 14th, the Families Unlimited Network has distributed $86,722. So, it was as expected. They started off slow. They wanted to get things ramped up and and do things right, and they really started to pick up speed. And they've now delivered human services funding to about 55 families in University Place for things like rental assistance, utility assistance. So far, over $75,000 has gone for rent assistance and over $10,000 for utility assistance. So 55 families. That's a really good report, and I'm happy to announce that to you. And they're not done yet. So and we've got this next round of funding that's coming that you just approved last week, and then of course you did the budget adjustment just prior to this. The city hopes to partner with other nonprofits in the distribution of additional funds under the second round of funding for human services. And we appreciate the flexibility that the council has provided to the staff. On the business side, on October 15th, we distributed 1,700 more postcards to every licensed business within the city announcing the second round of business relief funding. $300,000 is available of additional funding is available for COVID-related impacts to businesses, which the council approved us distributing that money. Businesses can apply for up to $10,000 in grants. The criteria was also simplified to allow for greater participation and flexibility, so we're happy to report that. Applications will be accepted through the end of this month, through October 30th. And then we expect disbursements to distribute monies in some time by mid-November. So a lot of more actions still planned, but we got our sea legs, and we're, we really have got we've got the routine down, and we think we can execute on this round as we did the last round. But we kind of know what to expect, and we're pleased to be able to get the word out to these additional businesses. Again, 1,700 postcards. So with that, I'll complete my report, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sugg. At this time, it's open for council comments and reports. Councilmember Figueroa, do you have any comments or report outs at this time?
Councilmember Figueroa does not.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Keel, any comments or report outs?
Councilmember Keel, nothing from me tonight.
Wow. Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, any comments or report outs at this time?
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, yes, I have one comment. I'm asking people to make sure that they vote. This morning, I put my ballot in the secure drop box across from the fire station. And when I pulled in, there were 4 cars in front of me. And when I got to the drop box, there were 3 cars behind me. So there seems to be quite an interest. I'm not a pundit, so I can't tell you what that means, except that people are voting. Also, I will pass on that there was a longer line at Starbucks when I got done, but that's fine. There always is. But please vote. It's your right, and please do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pro Tem Lee. Councilmember McCluskey, any comments or report outs at this time?
None at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Fleming, any comments or report outs?
Madam Mayor, I don't have any comments or report outs, but I'm glad I wasn't at Starbucks.
You should have been in line in Drexler where they actually had a backup. It was rush hour there all day today. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, any comments or report outs at this time?
Mayor Bellisi, Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, just I assume that you will report out today's meeting this afternoon, and then I won't have to say a thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Yes, I do have a report out. It has been a slow couple of weeks. However, I want to give a shout out to our police department. They started their virtual police academy 2 weeks ago on Thursday night, and they're doing virtual presentations, and I've been honored to attend both of them. The first meeting was just on the hiring process and training that officers go through, not only to become have their applications accepted, but to also become deputies, and then the ongoing training that they receive. And it's amazing that they have time to actually do their work with all the added training requirements they have throughout the year that's placed on them. And then this last Thursday's meeting was on defense tactics, and it was very interesting to listen to all the different requirements and how they conduct themselves and when force is to be used and not used. They actually did do a demonstration on the vascular neck restraint and explained the reasons and how the technique is used, and actually had some statistics that showed the how, for lack of a better word, how safe that technique is versus other types of measures that they could use in an extremely hostile situation. But the academy has been well attended by residents both in our city as well as throughout the county. So I'm looking forward to their next meeting next Thursday and getting the information out. These presentations were recorded and are available on our YouTube channel for anybody who's interested in gathering the information. So you don't have to be available on Thursday evenings to attend the academy. This afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, myself, our Deputy our deputy manager, Marisa Craig, and Marion Holloway met with our 16th Cab new leadership, Colonel Friesen. He just transferred over here from Fort Bragg a few months ago, so he's still getting familiar with University Place and his new command staff, but he has already been out to Whole Foods in Chambers Bay. It's one of his and his family's favorite places to recreate. So it's going to be very interesting to get reacquainted with new command staff and to set some priorities and get them involved in our community. So we're hoping to have a presentation and an introduction to council as well as our community in January, hoping that maybe we have an opportunity to meet in person by that time and really welcome them into the community. So more to come from that. We should be getting some tidbits in our newsletter, etc. But the introduction will be in January, February timeframe as time permits. So I just wanted to let you know we had a nice, interesting conversation. So we shall see what the new year brings. So with that, that's all that I had to report out at this time. So I will go to our next item, which is our study session, and that's the 1% property tax levy. And again, we have the honor of having our Finance Director, Leslie Blaisdell, provide us with a staff report. So go ahead, Ms. Blaisdell.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Leslie Blaisdell, Finance Director. The city received the preliminary certification of assessed values levy limit factor from Pierce County on September 24th. We'll receive final values in late December. The limit calculation assumes a 0.60152% increase of the highest lawful levy based on the implicit price deflator using data released on August 27th. If the IPD changes, we will receive a revised levy limit calculation. On October 5th, the City Council held the first study session of the 21-22 proposed biennial budget, and that budget does include the statutorily allowed increase in the property tax in each year of the biennial budget. Public hearing on the proposed budget will be held later tonight, or actually earlier this evening, November 2nd and November 16th. In order to implement the increase for 2021, it is necessary to adopt an ordinance imposing the increase in the regular property tax levy. All property tax revenues received by the city are dedicated to the police fund, whose contracted expenses increase by 3% annually. The memo I provided includes some calculations that talk about what those numbers are. The assessed value increased 12.2% from last year's numbers, and the impact to an average homeowner is about $5.40, and that's total for the year on a property tax bill, should the increase be approved and implemented by council. The council will have two options. We'll have a public hearing on this on November 2nd, and the two options are to either levy the property tax without the statutorily allowed increase, or to increase it commensurate with the 1% increase, which is in the 21-22 proposed budget. Staff recommends option 2, but it is up to council. So that concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you, Ms. Blaisdell. Okay, at this time, Councilmember Figueroa, do you have any questions at this time?
No, I don't.
Okay. Councilmember Keel, any questions at this time?
Councilmember Keel, I have no questions.
Okay. Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, any comments or questions?
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, I have no questions.
Okay. Councilmember McCluskey, any questions at this time?
Councilmember McCluskey, I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Fleming, any questions at this time?
Madam Mayor, I've got two questions. Thank you. Leslie, thank you for that updated report. I just wanted to get clarification on the option one, option two. Option one was to stick to the statutory authorization to raise the property tax levy, and option two was for the council to go beyond the statutory. Did I understand that correct?
No, option one is to not implement the statutorily allowed increase. So you can choose to implement it, which is option two, or leave it where it is.
Okay, and then my second question on the $5.40 per household, is that $5.40 per household total, or is that $5.40 per thousand?
That's $5.40 total, and that's based on implementing the increase. Based on the increase in the assessed values, of course, everyone's taxes go up just a little bit. I did run a calculation. If no increase is implemented, the property tax would still increase by $3. If we implement the increase, it increases by $5.40. So the net between that two, the council's deciding on $2.39. Again, that is in total, not per thousand.
And the $2.30 is allocated to where in our budget?
All of our property tax monies go to the police fund for public safety.
All right, thank you very much.
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, any questions at this time?
Thank you, Mayor Bellisi. No questions. Councilmember Fleming, I think, covered many of those issues. Thank you.
Thank you. I also have no questions at this time. I do understand that this will be, I believe we have it scheduled at our next meeting for consideration at that time. So if you do come up with questions between now and our next meeting, I suggest that you do get in contact with staff to get that question addressed. So our next study session item is the 2021-22 proposed biennial budget. This is our second study for passage of the ordinance. And again, our Finance Director, Leslie Blaisdell, the ball is in your court.
Thank you, Mayor. As you said, this is our second study session. To remind our citizens and those watching, the 2021-2022 budget is a balanced and conservative budget, and it assumes a continuation of the 2020 levels of service to the community. Any changes that occur during the various review and study sessions will be put into the document and included in the final document that comes to council for approval on November 16th. Like I've said earlier this evening, we're continue to be conservative with our revenue projections for the biennium, and it does include the property tax increase that we discussed at this point. On the expenditure side, it's a status quo budget with a modest level of inflation assumed for supplies and services. It includes a COLA for staff in 2021 and 2022, although the amount in 2022 is just an estimate pending the release of the June CPI, which is what we base our COLA on. And we've provided council with a list of some new items that are included in the budget. Tonight, I wanted to focus on one area pursuant to our budget policies. There's one item that we need to look at a little more specifically. Organizations that are not part of the city, but who receive funding from the city should not have their appropriation carried forward from year to year. The appropriations need to be reviewed by council for reauthorization during the budget process. Our proposed budget includes a budgeted amount of $10,000 in each year for community grants. TACID and the Crystal Judson Family Justice Center are budgeted to receive $3,000 each in each year, and the remaining $4,000 was added by council during the 2019-2020 budget for any new requests that may be brought to the city council. While that amount is appropriated as part of this budget adoption, the authorization to disperse those additional funds to an organization would need approval by the city council before we did that. Each year, prior to getting their disbursement, Tacit and Crystal Judson provide us with a report of their services that they provide to University Place residents. Once that report is received, then the budgeted funds are dispersed to the organization. I did attach the 2019 reports from both organizations to this document so that you could see the types of things that they do for our residents. So this concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions related to the community grant portion, as well as any other questions related to the 21-22 proposed biennial budget.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councilmember Figueroa, do you have any questions at this time?
No, not at this time, Mayor.
Okay. Councilmember Keel, do you have any questions at this time?
Great, thank you, Mayor. Just one question, well, a comment and then a question. A comment is, from what I read so far, it's a typical excellent work that you guys do. I look forward to digging into this more and then looking at the other conversations that we're going to have about, you know, the budget going forward. So I look forward to that. The question I have is kind of a small question, but it just, you know, being used to things being the way that they always are, this isn't the same. And so I'm just wondering what happened. Typically, and it's a small thing, but typically for council, everything we do when we have all council displayed, it's usually mayor, mayor pro tem, and then every other council member in position order. You know what I mean? And so when I'm looking at the document now, it's not that way. And I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, we're all up there, but I'm just wondering, why do we differ from that? Because every time we do it, it's always in mayor, mayor pro tem, and then council position order.
Are you referring to page 5, the elected officials page?
Yeah, the elected officials page, I don't know. Yeah, page 5, yes.
Yeah, though it looks like it's in there as alphabetical, but we could certainly change it to either put it in position number order or include the position number in the description below each picture. That's something we could easily change.
Well, we normally do position number order.
Okay.
And that's, unless I'm off, but that's what we always do, so.
Okay.
Thanks. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, any questions at this time?
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, I have no questions at this time.
Thank you. Councilmember McCluskey, any questions at this time?
No questions at this time. Thank you for humoring me and answering them earlier.
Councilmember Fleming, any questions at this time?
Councilmember Fleming, no questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, do you have any questions at this time?
Thank you, Mayor Bellisi. Yes, I do. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, I have a couple of questions. Let's see, Leslie, just right off, is it, since you're presenting this information, I'm assuming to your knowledge, we meet all of our policies and guidelines as we've set in the various documents, and we're adhering to the bond requirements that we as a city have taken responsibility for overseeing?
Yes, we are. During the budget preparation process, City Manager Sugg, Eric Faison, and I went through the budget policies and guidelines in depth and verified that everything was being met and followed. Like we brought up the organizations issue tonight. Next week, another policy is related to CIP. We'll be doing a focus on the CIP plan. But we went through that list and verified that everything was being followed.
Well, great. Thank you for doing that. And it does can be a bit tedious, but it's necessary. And I'm glad to know that you've got that taken care of. I appreciate that. You had mentioned earlier tonight, just a moment ago, about the organizations that we contribute to that are not part of the city. And for the most part, they tend to focus on certain funding related to helping domestic violence victims and things along that line. Last year or last time, we had put some additional money aside, and with the idea if someone applied, they could draw down on that. Did anyone apply?
No, no one applied for that.
Okay. But we still have it in the budget to have another 4,000 set aside in the event that we do have an additional application or two.
Correct.
All right, great. Well, we can see how things work with that. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the Stormwater Management Fund. I touched on it in the last meeting, but wanted to get folks. So we've been building reserves in that fund to help with capital projects that are appropriate and necessary, which and coming up in 2021, we have a number of them, and also a bit in 2020. As a result, many of those reserves are being pulled down and used as they should be used. Money isn't just to sit there in the bank, it's to make improvements in the stormwater system in our community, and that's why people pay their fees, and we use it appropriately. That's going to, though, potentially have some impact on how we deal with future capital projects. When we're looking for matching funds, we have tended to use stormwater, our stormwater management plan, to find those funds. And come 2022 and subsequent years, those funds may not be there. We have also used those funds, as that match. We've also engaged our internal engineering division to help do that work. And if those funds aren't there or the construction matches and we don't have construction projects, that may have a different, it brings some question about how do we productively engage our engineering team. And that's, Leslie, you're following what I'm saying there?
I am.
Okay, right. So I mentioned that to council. That's not an issue for today necessarily, but it's something on our horizon. And we'll want to think about how best to deal with that, or where else do we go for construction matching funds. But we have a shift coming to us in roughly 10 or 12 months about how we deal with our future construction projects. And just wanted to highlight that because I think it's a bit of a change we can think about to be ready for. Let's see, I think outside of that, thank you for adding the information earlier tonight on a question that I had on the 1% in the public safety fund, just so people can see that when we increase our property taxes, our collections by 1%, which is our maximum, and that all goes towards public safety, which is to say police. But the police bill goes up 3% each year. We can't keep up. It has to come. More dollars need to come in from somewhere. And I think you highlighted that for us. I appreciate that, just so folks know what's going on and what the need is for that. With that, I think that's my questions for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I think staff has done a tremendous job in being very clear and concise in their budget presentation, and have been very receptive when questions are being asked. And so I appreciate it. I don't have any questions at this time. I do think that the $10,000 that we have historically had on our budget to allocate towards Tacit and what was the other word, towards the Crystal Judson, and then a $4,000 slush fund in case of need, I think is a small token and a small amount of money that we can have that will help a portion of our citizens be able to seek the need and services outside our community to the providers that provide those unique services. So I'm all for keeping those items in our budget as budgeted at this time. So that's my way in on that one. I noticed nobody else said anything. I'm assuming silence on this is concurrence with the way it is being handled. But I think publicly we need to acknowledge that we understand where those funds are going and how they are being used in our community. So unless there's follow-up questions or comments, I think this item on our study session is concluded this evening. We still have an opportunity to think more and come up with questions as we proceed on with this. So this isn't our last opportunity. So Thank you again, Ms. Blaisdell, for your attendance this evening.
Thank you.
Yeah. Our next item on the agenda is our study session on the Emergency Management Code. We have reviewed this in prior meetings, but this is another study session before we line it up for potential consideration at a future meeting. I am going to ask our staff, Jennifer Hales, and our attorney, Matt Kaiser, and I believe even Lisa Patoric is online to address this issue. So I see that our attorney, Mr. Kaiser, is just anxious to get started, so I will defer the meeting to him.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. Matt Kaiser, City Attorney. I can't have Leslie have all the fun tonight in terms of repeated presentations to you guys. So fortunately, we came in force tonight. Also with me on the line is Jennifer Hales, our Public Safety Administrator, as well as Lisa Patoric, our Human Resources Director, which pulls double duty on the emergency management side. As the mayor indicated in her preliminary remarks, this is something that has come before the council before, but it also hasn't come before the council quite under the circumstances that we find ourselves in right now. As council certainly aware, we are in the middle of a COVID-related emergency. We've been in a state of emergency locally since middle of March of this year. And if news accounts are to be believed, certainly with respect to the distribution of a cure, vaccination, et cetera, seems to be on the horizon, for widespread distribution sometime next year. And that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is sort of a midstream review on this. And so the kind of question, let me kind of start off with is, why are we talking about emergency management code related stuff now? When you're in the middle of an emergency, that seems like an odd time to start talking about it. And there's a couple of things going on. The first, that's just worth highlighting for the benefit of council and as to refresh council's recollection on this point. As you may recall, late last year, early this year, the City of University Place entered an interlocal agreement with the City of Lakewood, as well as West Pierce, for emergency management related services. Part of doing that was to leverage emergency management funds. And when you're trying to leverage emergency management funds, it's important to have an emergency management code that is compliant in such a way that you can take advantage of obtaining those emergency management type funds. And so what we brought forward today is a code that we believe will have an opportunity and increase our opportunities to do that into the future. The second, and this kind of goes back to some of my introductory remarks, given the fact that we've been in this current state of emergency for the last 5 months, and we're going to probably be in it for at least for the foreseeable future, when you typically have an event or an action, you do some degree of after action planning. We're not going to be in that situation for a foreseeable future, but what we have identified as we're going through the current emergency are opportunities for the council to clarify pieces of code, code that might not be working necessarily the way we want it to be working, and that has the ability for the city to enhance its emergency operations response. From a public facing perspective, not a lot's changed, but a lot will be changing in terms of on the internal side. And so let me kind of turn to that first. And really looking at the code, there's 4 main things I want to highlight. The first is that our original emergency management code, and most of the code that's on the books right now, was adopted back in 1996, 24 years ago, year after incorporation. A lot of our code that was done at that time still reflects a 1996 attitude, 1996 mentality, with a couple of amendments along the way. How we've responded to emergencies and how we view municipal and local government response has changed since then. A couple of low-hanging fruit examples. For instance, in our code, we advise our residents to be ready for 72 hours. That's no longer the norm. The norm is now up to 14 days. We identified, there's a code provision there that identified that we should be, have an emergency management plan by 2001. That's 19 years ago. We need to kind of bring stuff like that forward. So there is a degree of modernization that certainly has to take place. The second is making sure that we have a deep bench. And when I'm talking about a deep bench, how do we respond to emergencies? Obviously, the basic, and this is what happened in the case of the COVID emergency. City manager declared an emergency, and we've gone from there. And you've heard a lot tonight already in terms of the city's financial emergency response. But a lot of the other stuff has been behind the scenes. The liaisoning with other local governmental entities, other entities within our community, and some that are even outside our community, and the ability to cleanly define those lines of responsibility. As you go back and you look at the 1996 code, there is certainly a need to streamline that process so that way that deep bench is still there and that there are those clear lines of responsibility. The third thing I want to talk about, and it's something I don't think we would have readily have seen, but for the COVID emergency, and this is one that I credit a number of members of the council for, and it involves how does the council play a meaningful role in the response to an emergency, particularly in a council manager form of government. And I'm going to give you a very specific example. Very early on in this emergency, as you may recall, council did not meet for a month. Shortly after we declared our state of emergency, we missed one, if not two, regular council meetings, and we were able to get back. I was approached, hey, is there a meaningful way to have, maybe a subcommittee of the council meet, take on some of these council functions, so when council is able to resume and regroup as a whole, we're ahead of it. And it was a really good idea then. It's a really good idea now. Unfortunately, we have done something that we kind of tied our shoelaces together on, which is if you look at our council rules, in ordinary times, council committees have to be established by the council. So if you have to meet to set up a committee, that gets real circular real fast. And in an emergency situation, it doesn't quite work. So what it did do in a bigger picture, and part of the pieces that we're commending to you for tonight, is how does council respond in circumstances like that are uniquely legislative, uniquely within the council purview? And so it got us thinking on a couple things. The first is the ability for the mayor to set up council subcommittees and then just meet. The second is then, if you do wish to meet, the ability for the mayor to override relevant provisions of the council rules to facilitate those meetings. Both of those, the mayor would essentially ask questions first, get council permission after the fact, very similar to how the city manager does with the emergency orders. And then the third thing, and recognize you don't have to do this, but we're trying to look ahead, is we've involved a number of members of our commissions as part of our emergency response. Is there truly the need to temporarily boost commission membership, appoint members of commissions, and then again, ask for council permission to confirm those after the fact if you need commissions to be involved in that response, whether it's not the emergency management, the Economic Development Commission, the Planning Commission, or some other commission as part of that. So present sort of a parallel path for council actions, somewhat similar to the city manager, but recognizing the uniqueness of each of those roles. So that's the third thing. And then the fourth and final thing that I just want to talk about is the ability to enforce emergency orders. Throughout the course of this emergency, the city manager has issued 5 emergency orders, all of which that council has approved. 4 of those relate to businesses and were requested by outside business interests and the like. Should be relatively non-controversial, arguably helpful, whether it's expanding the use of right-of-way, extending deadlines, that sort of thing. And then the 5th was extending business licensing. Those emergency orders certainly could go further. We haven't had a need to. Hopefully we won't have to. But if you take a deeper dive into the code, and it very well may have been a drafting oversight back in 1996, there is no meaningful approach to actually enforce. There are no penalties associated with those orders if you had to do something that was more intensive. The only penalty that's currently in the code is if you falsely wear or display an emergency management badge. I think that was probably a 1996 oversight, but I don't know. But if we do need to do something like that, we need to have the ability to do some penalties or in some way to meaningfully enforce what we're talking about. But one of the other things that came out of the course of this emergency was the ability to also meaningfully address and do a meaningful emergency response. Early on, we shut down our parks. We had issues, making sure that everyone was compliant, socially distanced with the parks. We identified issues with parking in various parts of our community. All of those are punishable by infractions. The punishment on the infractions isn't much. But the thought was, well, if it's related to the emergency response, maybe we should temporarily bump those fees up if you can prove to a judge it's emergency response related. So we put that in the code, at least as a recommendation for council. That's something that council's willing to consider. So those are the 4 things that we've identified in the code. Most of these, I'd like to think, are general cleanup. Most will not necessarily be issues that the public will see in terms of public facing, but it doesn't internalize how we go about responding better to emergencies. It's also worth noting that we did run a draft of this code through the Washington Military Department, which administers these grants for their comments and approval, or comments and review and feedback. We also reviewed this with our Public Safety Advisory Commission with a unanimous recommendation for this. They did provide some helpful assistance that did result in modifications to some of the draft language that we looked at early on that are included in this draft. So with that, I will take a brief moment to pause, see if my colleagues on the horn, either Jennifer or Lisa, have anything to add. And barring that, yield the screen, as it were, back to the council.
Okay.
Nothing to add, Matt.
All right.
Okay. And nothing from Ms. Patoric either. Okay, so at this time, Councilmember Figueroa, do you have any questions?
Not yet. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Keel, any comments or questions?
Councilmember Keel, no questions.
Okay. Councilmember Pro Tem Lee.
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, I have no questions at this time.
Okay. Councilmember McCluskey.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a few questions. One of them is in the planning stage when we talk about the citizens being prepared on their own for 14 days. I think if we don't educate them and train them, they will be caught off guard. You know, they're thinking short term, but to prepare themselves for a greater period of time to be on their own. So in the planning phase of our emergency management plan, is there an education and a training or something in consideration to let our citizens know that this could be a distinct possibility in an emergency?
So operationally, Councilmember McCluskey, that's always a target. Always, 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 always. So just like crime prevention, we will continue to march and beat on that drum and share that with the public. Preparedness. So absolutely.
Okay. So there is a plan?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's ongoing and constant.
It's ongoing, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think it's in anyone's frontal lobes right now. So maybe once COVID is over, we can figure out a way so that we can plan some sort of communication to the public that this is what they sorely need to be prepared for 14 days. Because even if the best educational plan going forward, I worked at the American Red Cross, I know most people will not be prepared. And so we'll need to also figure that nut out as well, because that's just the nature of the beast that we're dealing with. And also we talked about in a organization for compensation in 2.35.040 organization number 4. So I was thinking about the compensation components, and if they're public officials, they're already getting paid. And now they transition their hat to probably the emergency mode. So are we talking about in the compensation bringing on additional people that are not paid, like maybe volunteers, paying them, compensating them for their services? In what regards was the organization in the compensation component taking place? Because I would imagine at the end of the day that would become a city expense.
It would be a city expense. the provision of the draft municipal code that you're looking at is what the emergency management organization of the city, which otherwise consists of. So if we actually had to hire emergency management operators, if you will, that's who we would generally be looking at. And Jennifer can speak a little bit more to this, but part of the interlocal that we have with our 2 other neighboring jurisdictions is sort of a salary pool where we all chip in a little bit for an FTE that handles some of those emergency management organizational tasks and advises and assists each of the jurisdictions appropriately. And I'll turn it back over to Jennifer to elaborate.
Actually, Matt, that's exactly what we do. The consortium kind of pay into this body 1.5 that sort of helps us, kind of does that full time for our region. Updates the plans, looks at the checklist, comes into our facilities, actually looks at what we have, helps us build the best product and the best system that we can have, and then also looks at it as a region, right? So west of I-5, if there's some kind of problem or threat that occurs, how can we be best prepared as a region? And to be quite honest with you all, that arrangement just began. COVID kicked off in March. So we're testing the system, which has worked very, very, very well. Very proud of the work that we've done here in the city and as a region. But we're just beginning now that COVID's kind of coming down a little bit for us, at least in terms of the response, to kind of looking at the plans and discussing other things besides emergency response.
Okay, thank you. And my other question is the emergency authority of the mayor. There was in one part of the document, the front part of the document, it just stated the mayor, and it didn't really have the mayor pro tem engagement into it. The second part of it was when the mayor pro tem, they were out of commission, and so there was a transition plan as to who would get engaged, the legislative components to that. So my thought was that when the mayor has to have the authority under the emergency component, it would be great if she had a second council member to also confer with as the emergency is moving forward, which makes sense, would be the mayor pro tem, to have that sort of partnership in place. So that was just my thought there. And to counter on that is how to inform the city council under emergency in an emergency situation where the communications are not cut off. I can understand council will not be communicated in a timely manner. Things can happen quickly and fast, but if the communication channels are not cut off, that the council needs to be informed of it as reasonably as soon as possible under those conditions. And I didn't see any verbiage in regards to that kind of introspection for that. So that's kind of where my thoughts were going on there. I'm trying to understand the processes and things and the transitions of the leadership and components. So those are my thoughts right now at the beginning of reading the document that was presented in our agenda packet. So I don't know if you want to answer or comment.
Let me provide 2 quick responses for you on your 2 points. The first part is whether the mayor plus mayor pro tem or mayor plus somebody else or mayor pro tem plus somebody else makes the determination. On that one, I will leave to the 7 of you to discuss how you see fit. The second part, in terms of what the timetable for confirmation is, if you take a look at proposed 085 subpart B, where it speaks to all acts of the mayor undertaken pursuant to
Hold a
subsection.
second. I'm scrolling.
Okay. It's on page 209 of the council packet, if you're looking at it in PDF format.
Okay. Okay, there's penalties. So 2.35.090 or?
085 subpart B.
I got it.
All right.
Found
Where
it.
it talks about all acts of the mayor undertaken pursuant to the powers I had talked about are subject to confirmation by the council at the earliest practical time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. I guess that answers my question there.
Okay.
Thank you, Matt.
Yep.
Sometimes when you read electronically after you spend 10 hours a day looking at a screen and then go over a council packet, then it's in
Nope.
red.
No worries.
All right, thanks. I'll scratch that one off my list.
I think you're muted, Madam Mayor.
Council Member Fleming, do you have any questions at this time?
But I can read lips, so that's good.
Oh, you did good.
Actually, I do not at this time, so thank you very much.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, do you have any questions at this time?
I guess I have a couple of quick comments. One is I'm glad we're doing this, and it's going to be a while before we get to the real after action report to fine tune from there. So now's a chance to get some real world experience and put it in place while it might still be applicable. Anyhow, one of the things I was going to comment on is the succession planning for the mayor pro tem, and the document would have us apparently periodically select someone for the role of, that is to say, have council select someone for the role of I've forgotten the exact term that was used, but a council member that is in the line of succession, sort of the Secretary of State or the Speaker of the House for the group. So, and I was going to offer another alternative, not as an absolute solution, but just to be considered, which is the senior most member of the council would be the line of succession. And if there's multiple members with the same seniority, then we have some random selection. But that's sometimes done as another alternative, and we don't have to try and remember to do that every couple of years, from the council perspective. Otherwise, it does seem necessary reviewing the mayor's emergency powers, and they seem to be useful and appropriate. And I was trying still to get under the succession planning with the administrative side of things, with the city manager side. I think I need to look at that a little harder. So we'll have some opportunity either to go vote on this soon or in a subsequent meeting to talk about those things. So those are just some quick observations at the end of the day. I don't think I have a question, just some comments. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Your idea, Mayor Pro Tem, on the succession planning for council, I like that, looking at the most senior council member after Mayor Pro Tem. I think that way you don't have to go every few years and reinvent the wheel or try and figure it out. So I would be in favor of notating that in the ordinance myself, to make it a lot clearer that way. And that was kind of what I was thinking of too, as I read the documents. It's like, okay, what's the next step if we have a major disaster and we are unable to locate council members? Where do we go from here? So that makes the most sense, I think, and I would appreciate if it could be included in there at that point. I see that Councilmember Keel raised his hands earlier. Do you have additional comments or questions, Mr. Keel?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I didn't want to go there tonight, but I think that, we're going to have, more conversations, so I might as well just jump into this right now. But the first thing is that your comment about the senior most person, I agree with that. I would just ask staff to define how we're talking about most senior, right? Is it
Not age, longevity on council.
yeah, so but then yeah, I mean that would be one thing, but yeah, so just define it, okay? That would be good. And then the question I had is some of the things we're bringing up at least strikes me as the proverbial slippery slope, right? I like what was on paper now, and with the addition of the senior piece of it, I really like that. But as we start talking about, you know, other things about, you know, adding things and stuff, it begins to be a little slippery to me, in as much that right now, when there's no emergency, we have a clear council city manager role, and all those things are all laid out, right? And it's been working, okay, and it's in law and all that stuff. When you have an emergency, then now the city manager has a certain right and responsibility to act in the emergency, and that's, you know, assuming that. And now if we start saying, okay, now in emergency, we want to have now the mayor be kind of like the legislative piece, and then they're able to do legislative things in this emergency. To me, the slippery slope is, okay, so now you got an emergency format for the administration and emergency format for legislation. Do they automatically then have to work together? How do they work together? You know, and is it the typical councilmatic, you know, city manager working, or is it some other kind of special interrelation between the two of them working under this? Are you tracking with me, Matt?
I think so. Let me see if I can take a stab at the answer in terms of those concerns. And let me focus on the legislative piece. Well, let me start on the city manager piece for a second, which is on the deck, whether it's a declaration of emergency or emergency orders, the manager has the authority to declare an issue, whether it's an emergency declaration or emergency orders, all of which is subject to council confirmation. And that's something that this council, we've been through a couple times already here today. So what this is trying to address, sort of that second piece, which is, okay, how do you assemble? Is it possible to assemble a council? And how do you go about the mechanics of assembling a council? Where due to the emergency, there might be impediments to doing so. You know, whether it's early on in COVID, you know, trying to get our technology up and working, the distancing piece, can you actually meet in person? And getting through some of the impediments that you might have, so that way council or the remaining members of council are able to assemble to discharge those duties, to serve as a check. So I see them actually as very complementary pieces.
Okay.
So I hope that answers your question.
No, it does. It's getting to it. That's what I assumed we were talking about, and that's why I didn't have comments in the very beginning. But as conversation ensued, the door kind of cracked open a little bit. So I guess, Mayor, what I would, and staff, what I suggest that we put in is, a lot of times when I've been in these situations, we talk a lot about what it is, but then also there's a section that talks about what it is not. Okay, and so I think there might be some opportunity for us to talk about what this is not. Okay, and we could talk more about that before, but, and I know probably in your mind, Matt, it's very clear what it is, and it's pretty cut and dried. But I mean, that's just in your head. Other people might have some other ideas about, well, what about this, or what about that, or what about this other thing? You know, and I think we're going to hear that as we begin to keep talking about that. So I'm suggesting that we have some piece in there that talks about what this is not. And I can explain that.
Mr. Kaser is dwelling on this.
I'm mulling on it. I don't have a response for you right now.
Yeah, and we could talk more later.
Yeah.
But,
okay, Council Member Fleming, I see you have your hand raised.
I do, Madam Mayor. Actually, I was going to echo the question that Councilmember Keel had raised, and that is in trying to determine the seniority of the council members. It's just as the staff tries to figure this one out, it's just important to keep in mind the council is elected in two separate groups, or clusters, if you will, or cohorts. So when you try to figure that one out, it may be simple due to how many times a council member's been elected, but it could also be quite a challenge if they were all elected at the same time and have the same number of years of service. So good luck with that one. Huh?
Yeah.
Or if one was gone for a number of years and came back.
We just write that one off. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different variations. It's hard to figure this one out. But good luck.
Well, hopefully we don't have to get that low in the priority pool, but it's always nice to have that just in case. So I think, does staff have a good idea of some of the concerns that were brought up tonight that need to be addressed for a future study session? Because it sounds like it might be a topic worth discussing before we go into actual final consideration on this.
Yeah,
and there might be council members that will dwell on this and come up with some additional questions that will need to be looked at between now and the next study.
If there are, I didn't mean to cut you off, Madam Mayor.
No.
If there are, feel free to reach out to me on those. Happy to field those. And I have no problems rewriting that last provision such that it would be the council member with the most years of service. And then failing that, we'll come up with something to put, we'll keep that language for the number 4 spot.
No. Okay. All right. Nothing like a real emergency to go through the what ifs and lessons learned thus far that we had not been able to address because our regulations were up to date. So I am sure this will be a living document for at least the next couple of years as we finalize this emergency. And we've learned something from it. So with that, I will conclude this portion of our study session and move on to our final item for the evening, which is our utility tax. And for that, I'm going to ask that Eric Faison come join us on screen.
I am here, Madam Mayor. I am in your packet, you'll find an ordinance and a resolution related to tonight's study session on the proposed utility tax on water, sewer, and electric services in the city. The proposal is a result of brainstorming following the last study session as a way of addressing some of council's concerns. The tax ordinance is the first item. What we would be proposing here is to implement the 6% utility tax in 2 phases. 3% is proposed in 2021 and the remaining 3% in 2022. You'll note on page 213 of your packet, which is within the text of the ordinance, that the sewer utility tax would be allocated to the street fund. The electric utility tax would be allocated to the general fund, and the water utility tax would be allocated to the public safety fund. The net result of these taxes is, let's see if I can share my screen in a way that you guys can actually read all of this. Please bear with me. Is it visible?
Yep.
All right. So here you see the general fund with the tax implemented. And the net result is the general fund remains in the black all the way through 2040. The line right below that is the public safety fund. And you see the public safety fund remains in the black until 2037. And the street fund, located here, remains in black until 2034. But you notice the total here of the negative number in the public safety fund and the negative number in the street fund can easily be absorbed by the surplus in the general fund. So the net result of this plan, doing 3% next year and 3% the following year, is that the city would be have stable finances through this extended planning period. The second part of what's in your packet is deals with the Transportation Benefit District's vehicle license fee. Actually, this Transportation Benefit District is now part of the city as something you've done earlier, but our current fee is $35 per vehicle. And this fee is used to do non-funded, non-grant funded projects such as chip sealing, pavement overlays. When it was at $20, you increased it to $35, and the $15 was dedicated solely towards residential streets and secondary collectors. So generally speaking, the way this works is about half of it is used more operationally and half of it is used for actual project specific. So that's $17.50 for each. The $17.50 for operations, we believe, would be solved by, would be not necessary if we have the utility tax, because the utility tax is paying for operations. So that leaves $17.50 that are only project related. In the resolution before you, what we're proposing is to reduce the vehicle license fee down to $10 for a period of 5 years. And the reason why we're not reducing it down to $17.50, which would fully fund those projects, is for the past year we have collected vehicle license fee depending on or not knowing what the outcome of Initiative 976 would be and whether we'd have to return those funds. If we use all of those funds for projects and we divide it by the $7.50 delta between the $17.50 and the $10, it would be basically a wash for the next 5 years. So what we're proposing is to use those dollars for projects, use this $10 that you would be reducing the $35 fee down to for 5 years for projects. And then in the 5th year, you would again have a meeting where you would determine what the fee would be for the following 4 years. And so every 4 years, you would review this as part of your biennial budget. So it's our hope that with these proposed changes that these address most of the concerns that were raised at the last meeting. And should you agree, then this would go for discussion and potential approval at the next council meeting.
Okay, I take it that is the end of your presentation, Mr. Faison.
It is.
Okay. Councilmember Figueroa, do you have any questions at this time?
No, Mayor, but I do have some comments, if that's appropriate at this time.
Okay.
Okay, so I believe that, and I've given a lot of consideration since this has been brought up, that I've always had a concern, a hiccup with a TBD, mainly because the streets are being utilized by more than those people that have car tabs, meaning the motorcycles or RVs or cars. For one example among many others, and that is because it includes sidewalks, is the bicycle lane. There's no tabs on cost for bicycle lanes, but yet we do maintain a bicycle lane. And so it's taxing others for other folks benefits. So to me, this utility tax seems to be something that is spread out more among the citizens and households in University Place. And so, and I think that's a fair, one of the things I always care for is when there's a cost that benefits everyone, then it should be spread out so that it's almost impossible to always tax everybody. But this comes closer than the card tabs. And so, and I certainly like the idea of reducing. I would never go for card tabs being left at $35 and doing this utility tax. I would never agree with that. But reducing it significantly by $25 is quite significant, knowing that the $10 that we would leave in there would be specific for projects. And we all know, and we all debated, Councilmember Fleming wasn't here, and I don't believe Howard was here when this council, we debated this TBD a lot. And one of the things was that even at the 25, when we started at 20 and then 35, was that it was all for street maintenance and it was nothing for real projects. And we knew that we were kicking the can down the road on that and not knowing exactly what would ever happen. And so I believe that I don't think that $10 is going to fund all the projects that a city like ours is that has grown in population and the use of facilities, meaning streets, infrastructure, I should say. But certainly $10 goes a lot farther than zero. And I think that we have to be prudent. As much as I don't like keeping that TBD and now thinking about adding a utility tax, we have to look at the long term, the cost of not doing so on those citizens, and what bill are we giving to the citizens later on, the young people as well as the senior citizens that may be here. And I think it will be a disservice for us not to plan now and how to reduce that cost. And I think that this is one way to start that process. And certainly the utility tax, though no tax is favorable at any time, good times or bad times. But certainly there's other franchise fees, utilities that we tax, and we never have taxed Tacoma Power on Tacoma Public Utilities. And we've had this conversation before, and this option wasn't brought up. I'm not sure why. And but nobody's perfect, and sometimes we miss things, and whether we're council members or elected officials or administration, we just don't seem to catch everything at one time, and things pop up and says, oh, we could have done this a long time ago. And so it's okay to correct ourselves, and I think it's time to correct this particular utility tax that does two things. One, it becomes a fair taxation among all utilities that we do tax, and it gives us a funding source that, again, will keep people that continue to live in University Place, which is most of us now, if not our younger generation, from having to deal with a much higher cost and dilemmas that if we don't do this at all. So I'm looking forward to seeing this discussed and hopefully resolved through, I think a compromise of certainly reducing one while we enact the other. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Figueroa. Councilmember Keel, do you have any comments or questions at this time?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I have a comment as well. First, I just want to commend Eric and his team, whoever he spoke with this presentation and this new proposal. Given our last conversation that we had, our last council meeting, we were far apart from each other, and I think what he's come up with here, at least from what I can tell, really addresses the comments that I heard. So, way to go, Eric. Last time I was supportive of utility tax. I'm still supportive of utility tax for this reason, that it brings in two very large utilities that have not done the tax at all, which I think is unfair. The other thing is that, and I know we talk a lot about, how this tax gets passed on to citizens, and for sure it will, I believe. But the problem that I have with it is that that's something that the utility does. That's not us doing it. And I think that that's a piece that I wish my fellow, you guys could get. Okay, and the reason why I say that is because people love the school district. They love the school district. School districts have been raising taxes left and right on people all the time, and I know that because I was elected to that council for 10 years. I've been in the meetings at the council meeting where we talked about raising the taxes, and we did it in a way that people understood what we were doing and why it was needed, and they were okay with it. What I see as us as a council is that we're trying not to do stuff. We're trying to do other people's business for them, and then people are all mad at us, and we're not raising taxes. I mean, people are mad at us, and we get 9 pennies out of every dollar, and we're too busy worrying about other stuff. We need to, I think, be straight with people, be honest with them, say, hey, we need this, and here's why we need it, and this is what we're going to do with it. And we've done that at the school board for the 10 years that I was on there, elected on that board, and people loved it. And I think that we as a council need to get to that situation. So that's why I support it. I'm also supportive of this. As you guys know, the both times we voted on the TBD, I didn't vote for it. I didn't vote for it when it was $25. I didn't vote for it when it was at $35. And I'm supporting this not because the TBD is going to be at $10, but I'm supporting it because we're reducing it by $25. I wish it was zero, but it's going down $25. So I like that because I didn't vote for this neither time we voted for it before the TBD. And so I think that's going to be helpful for people. So anyway, those are my comments. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Council Member Pro Tem Lee, do you have any questions or comments at this time?
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, yes, I do. I pretty much concur with what Councilmember Figueroa said. The reasons behind his supporting the utility tax and the TBD. Services cost money, and taxes, unfortunately, are the way that governments generate money. I initially could not support the utility tax because it was going to be a lump sum next year, 2021, and it seemed to me that it would be affecting our citizens at a time when hopefully we'll be coming out of the pandemic and looking ahead and trying to dig out from under the financial debris that they have been built up for the last year or so. Eric Faison did some wonderful job projecting and tailoring these two proposals, and I certainly support making the utility tax incremental over 2 years. I believe it'll be less effective. It'll have less impact on these citizens. As far as the license tabs, I totally support reducing them to $10. I believe that once again, Eric Faison has worked his conservative magic and made this plan sound. And so I support this. Thank you.
Thank you. May I remind council that this is a study session and that, we're not here voting. We are just providing direction to staff on the final presentation. Councilmember McCluskey, do you have any comments or questions?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Faison, can you remind me of the total cost per household once this is fully implemented at the 6%?
We estimate $11. A lot depends on usage. So this is just for the average based off of a single family home, based off the information provided by TPU and Pierce County Sewer. So it'd be $11 per month.
Per month. Okay.
And that's when fully implemented. So the first year would be half that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, no one likes to raise taxes, as all council members have mentioned before me, but we have a donut hole to fill and fix that's getting bigger and bigger as we delay any plan or resolution to resolve our shortfalls that's coming up in the next few years. And I am sure the citizens will least like it if we go red in some of those funding accounts. They're not going to be happy, and they certainly will not believe that we've done our fiduciary duty to protect the city's financial health and infrastructure well-being. Utilities tax might be the least painful approach to go about it, but there is a small decrease in the TBD. So with that, my other question for you is the $10 fee, and I'm sure council hasn't thought about this, is it going to stay with the residential streets that we've had started to make some improvements so that the citizens can see direct impact in their streets and not only in just the arterials?
So the actual ordinance states under Section 3, expenditures, the revenues shall only be expended on transportation projects approved by the City Council with primary emphasis on maintenance and upkeep of non-grant funded projects such as chip sealing and related pavement management methods upon residential streets and secondary collectors.
Okay. All right.
Number one, council will dictate, and number two, it's really for projects.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. That's all my comments and questions.
Okay. Councilmember Fleming, do you have any questions and comments at this time?
Madam Mayor, I do, and thank you. And since it is a study session, I'm going to reserve comment in terms of whether I support or don't support. I did share with Eric earlier today that I was not in favor of it, but I want to really credit Eric for taking to heart, as others have already commented, the concerns that we all raised during the last opportunity we had to take a look at this proposal that's before us. No doubt the city has challenges in terms of into the future. How do we continue to maintain our streets? How do we add, law enforcement, for public safety, and how we do other things for the betterment of our community. I struggle, with a tax. I had an opportunity to speak to a group of citizens this past weekend who made the comment in passing that we as a council this year appear to be the council that can't pass up an opportunity to raise taxes or fees on them. And so there was concern out in the community about how we are, quote, becoming the tax and spend council. But those are comments, and that's just a group of citizens expressing their thoughts. My concern about this total cost on the cost per household, where it's $11 per household, I think we have to keep in mind that it's not really $11 per household, because the TPU and Pierce County Sewers will have their own rate increases added on top of that to cover their costs. So our citizens are going to bear ultimately whatever that sum total of the cost for doing this is. And we can make the argument certainly that county's county, utilities, and we've got to certainly look out for our community and our city. So, what do we do going forward? I'm still processing. I think the comments made by all of the council members tonight were good comments, both for as well as concerns about what do we do with it. So I'm still processing that, but still just have some hesitation and reservation, because when I look at how much money in our other fees and taxes that we have done already and what we're going to be doing as we get towards the end of the year, it's not just a couple of bucks here and a couple of bucks there. We're really adding dollars to the citizens, and we just got to put it all together and figure out what that looks like. So, though, in just kind of closing, I just want to say thank you to Eric, at least for listening to what the council was saying, and appreciate the work you put on that. And I'll see where it is at the end when it comes before council for a final passage. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, do you have any comments or questions at this time?
Thank you, Mayor Bellisi. A little of both. Eric, let me start with a question. When you looked at the $11 on average per household as an estimate of the cost for the utility taxes did we adjust for commercial or industrial? I know there was some conversation about that previously, and I was curious if that included, if there was some conversion or removal of the industrial commercial customers' revenues that would actually not be paid by a household, but paid by the business.
And no, this is what we've provided was just what would be for a single family household. I sent a query after the last meeting to TPU. I have not heard back yet. And so hopefully by the next meeting, I'll have that information, or maybe I'll distribute it to you once I get it. Just email all of you.
Sure.
But no, I don't have that.
Okay, well, thank you for reaching out, and that was primarily the question. But $11 is just based on the residential electrical use, or utility use, I should say.
That is based off all three. So,
all three?
Yes,
Okay.
for water, sewer, and electric.
But the user is, what I'm trying to get to is, it is the class of user is residential user. It is not.
Correct.
Okay, that's good enough. Thank you. So on a few other things, we have, as some have said, and I believe as well, an obligation to look to the future to understand how we can keep our community, our finances sustainable, how we can maintain services to a reasonable level that our community expects, and finding ways to get there. And if we can't pretend that we can do it, we need to actually be able to have the dollars to do it. We haven't found tools to be able to achieve that. And so we've been watching at the 10-year mark, which with a rolling 10-year horizon, what we've been referring to as our budget turning red, which is to say we don't have enough money coming in each year to pay the bills we expect to see 10 years from now. because we are limited in some things, such as property tax. We get to raise it by 1%, yet our expenses grow by 3%. You can't keep doing that for very long, as we've said. We have to do something in order to adjust for that. We can try and grow our retail business, and we have. But the reality is we can't grow enough retail to support that either. And so we are left with new ways to try and figure out how to fill the gap. What happens after year 10? Utility taxes that are available when we now talk about taxing the governmentally owned utilities. When we do that, it allows us to get to about a 25 or 30-year horizon from now, before we go red, before we start losing money with whatever revenue we have coming in, without further reducing services. I do hear and I do understand that our communities pays these taxes, and it comes out of people's pockets. I know that. I also know that I hear a lot of folks are interested in more police. A lot of folks are interested in recreation services in our community. And I don't know that this will get us there, but I do know if we do decide to do this, it'll get us closer to doing those things. And that's where I really see a lot of emphasis. And I do realize it comes out of people's pockets. When we actually roll back the car tab tax, if in fact we do that as well, that's a step in a direction that is very unusual. We heard this county in the previous election with the referendum action, I guess it was a year and a half ago, speak pretty clearly. They don't like the car tab tax. Now, our portion of it as a community is not the largest lion's share of what goes on there. Just like in property taxes, the city's portion is the smallest, one of the smallest fractions. Rather, it's the school district, the fire district, and some others that have bigger chunks of property tax. Yet we, because we're very visible, tend to be assigned with the one raising those taxes. The reality is we have primarily three different legs of a stool to be able to fund what we do to build our services on. And that's property tax, sales tax, and then utility tax. And we haven't been able to fully utilize utility tax. It is mighty intriguing and mighty tempting to want to be able to secure our future so that we can have a clear understanding that we can pay our bills for the next 20 years. If we can hold the line on other things, we'll have our bills paid for. We'll have the revenue and our citizens get the services they want. And at the same time, we get to roll back a very unpopular tax. Not to zero, but taking 70% less of that tax out of their pocket is a step certainly in the right direction in a lot of people's minds. And so that's what we do at a 10% TAB, or Transportation Benefit District, TBA, tax reduction. Boy, those are some good things all in all. And I guess we'll see where this takes us when we move forward with it. But there's a lot here to think about. There's a lot that can be achieved with this. Certainly I'm interested in seeing if we can't move forward in that direction. So that's my question. Those are my thoughts. We look forward to moving this on. In my view, we might as well move it on and see how it comes out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Mr. Faison, the numbers that you provided to us earlier on the public works budget and the police services or police safety budget, those budgets were based on the status quo, correct?
Correct. Well, actually, it's better than the status quo in that the status quo envisioned that we would be eliminating, as you recall, you funded 2 officer positions for a 10-year period. So the status quo envisioned those being eliminated in 2029. So
correct.
This
we're not adding additional. What I'm getting at is we're not looking to fund the police officers that are needed for what our community expects. It's to keep within the current numbers that we have for the next 20 years.
That is correct, Mayor.
Right. And then the public works budget was not to budget for the potential reconfiguration of streets or blacktopping streets. This was strictly to do maintenance on the streets. It was to do the chip sealing, to do the overlay, but not to rebuild residential streets that might be in need of rebuilding, correct?
That is correct, Mayor.
Yeah, and so these were still issues that we are facing even with these utility taxes and the TBD that we're just putting a Band-Aid on the bigger picture, and we continually do that. So I would like to caution both our citizens and our council that we're just, we look at the big picture. We know what our big needs are, that we still are lacking in funding. And this is just ensuring that our city staff stays at its current level, even though we as a city are growing and we may need additional staffing. We're keeping our public works budget at a maintenance level rather than a rebuild capital improvement level. And our public safety, our number one priority with our citizens is staying at the current staffing level with the 6% utility tax and the $10 TBD. We are creating a sounder financial basis, but it's still not addressing the long-term needs that we will still continue to have to look at. So that for me right now is still a concern. At the $35 level or even at a $25 level, we might have been able to plan some of the more public works type of budget items in there that we need. Yes, we will have a good general fund balance that can offset the red that's going on in our public safety and in our public works budget, but it still doesn't allow us, without doing some further fine tuning, to do the larger dollar items or to add the police that are needed, unless somebody in our community wins a lottery and donates us a lot of funding. So I think our citizens need to understand that we continue to just piecemeal things together to maintain the level of service now and not provide the additional services, the public recreation, the added police officers, et cetera, that they're expecting. So we're still going to have that conversation with our community as soon as we can get together and actually get face to face with them to get them to understand that it's putting us in a better financial position, but it is not long-term solving our needs that we have as a community. So, Councilmember Figueroa, you had your hand up earlier.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I just wanted to additional comments and for some clarification, and that is that was some talk about commercial versus residential, $11. I believe it doesn't matter whether it's residential or commercial. It's all 3% across the board. 3% to any commercial, industrial, and 3% to for the first year, and then 3% the second year. 6% total. So I'm not sure if $11, to talk about $11 is appropriate. It's really 3%. It just so happens on the residential side, that's what it represents on the average. The other thing is we really got to understand, and I hope I made my point. I'll try to do it one more time. And not to insult you guys, because you're all intelligent and you probably heard me, but I just want to make sure I'm heard. And that is that the $25 reduction in TBDs is significant. It's not a small reduction. It is significant. And as a matter of fact, and like I made my point earlier, it was a small segment of our population that was paying for this street maintenance and operations, paying $35, a big ticket. And that gave me, like Councilmember Keel, a lot of heartburn, among many others. When I look at this now, it's spread out more evenly among our population, that now instead of those people that were paying a lot more for everybody's benefit, they get a reduction actually by $14. If you take $11 off the $35, they have a $14 savings. Okay, and so to me, that's a good thing. And and everybody else, does their part as well. And it makes it a lot more even. Again, we really do have a responsibility not to kick the can and give the future. We won't be here. None of us will. But I know that many as council members. But I'll be living here, I hope, among like many of us, and if not our children, a lot of our children will be living here. And the last thing I want them to think is that we left them with debt. We left them with a budget that is unsustainable, and now they have to really do something big that is explosive. I don't think that's right. I don't think that's how people live normally in their best abilities. They always try to live if they live the world, they live their families. They try to make sure they don't live them with debt. That's one of the American things that we do, and I think that we should do that as government. The other one is that I need to ask Eric, and that is you set so much money from the sewers that will go to street funds, and so much money from electric that goes into the general fund, etc. Oh, and then the public safety from the water. What I didn't hear is, and I'm concerned about, is a portion, and not so much in the general fund as it is in the public safety and street funds, and that is how much of that money. I'm not interested in passing these utility tax if it's going to go toward growing staff, toward administration, but if it's going toward actually the public safety, it's actually going toward fixing the streets, repairing the streets. That's my interest. So what I don't hear is the limitation of administration to limit its cost and overhead. This is not a way to increase overhead. And not to insult you, respectfully, I've been around this world too long and in government, and I see when more money comes in, it's more toward overhead. And that's actually in the private sector. So that's one of the main concerns I have. And I do hope that we have that discussion as well. Thank you.
So, Councilmember Figueroa, I can tell you that in order to maintain these balances as we have projected, it means not adding staff, or at least not adding costs. So in these projections, there are no new staff increases. So as was mentioned previously in terms of the amount going to the public safety fund, it's not to add new officers. It is to maintain the officers that we currently have. Same with the general fund and the street fund. So that is purely in the intention, and of course, council will have control of this as part of the budget process.
Okay. Councilmember Fleming, you had your hand up, and then Mayor Pro Tem Worthington after that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I think you may have already stated it, but I just want to get some clarity in my head as we continue to discuss this issue. I think where I struggle is in someone made the comment which was appropriate about kicking the can down the road, and certainly the need to figure out how to balance our budget and meet our expenses. But yet, as a council, we're doing exactly that. We're kicking a different can down the road. And that is, when I ran for office, and then when I listened to Councilmember Worthington's presentation, I think it was a week ago, on the flash vote, there's the very consistent theme in our city from the citizens is they want us to be focused on public safety and parks programs. I mean, I've heard that over and over and over again, but yet in all of our deliberations, we tend to ignore those two public cries in our budgeting, in our figuring out how to add our, raise taxes and cover our expenses. And if I understood the mayor and her comments, which I think were very apropos, and Eric, your presentation, in this proposed tax increase, there is nothing in there for public safety or parks. This is just paying bills going into the future. Is that correct?
I guess the way I would describe it, council member, is without the money, we are in cutting mode. So there will be 2 officers that go in 2029, 2 more in 2031, and 2 more in 2033. So you'd be down to 6 patrol officers. This money is just to preserve what we have. There's not a revenue source that's been identified that would allow us to keep what we have and add, short of going to the voters for some sort of levy increase or bond measure. So I believe if you want to address those issues, I think those are issues that have to have a conversation with the public and an education so that when they vote, they realize what they're voting for.
So if we use that thought process, Eric, why wouldn't we take this particular issue to the voters? Since it's, letting the voters to decide what they want for street maintenance and other things. And, I just heard Councilmember Figueroa say, well, we took it to the voters, and as I recall, they turned it down. So are we saying that as a council, and I'm just asking questions since it's a study session, but are we implying that because the voters said no, we know better, we're going to overrule them on this one, but we're going to ignore them on the other? That they're saying are priorities, or how do we prioritize what the community, what our citizens are saying they want versus what we as the council or we as the city say we want? And I see them as divergent priorities versus aligned.
I think that what gets lost here is what we're legally required to do. So what we submitted to voters last time was to maintain a level of service that we thought was appropriate as it related to public safety, or to add, maintain rec and add other programming. They said no to maintaining rec and adding programs. We got rid of rec and we didn't add programs. They said no to maintaining police at the level we had it. We're now at police level that we think is bare minimum and that's being generous, right? So I think the council, if you excuse me in saying so, has a responsibility to at least maintain this level as a life safety issue. Then there's the issue of there are a lot of other things that we have to do that the public doesn't notice and frankly may not care about, but they're legal mandates. At our last meeting, I went through a list of positions that the law says we have to maintain, and none of those were police except for the police chief. So I think that in terms of where we are now, in terms of our expenditures and staffing levels, we're threadbare. You certainly have the right to cut more, but when you start looking at where those options are, I don't think those are options that the public would support, because I can tell you they're not in engineering, which is mostly grant funded. They're not in development services, which is largely funded by fees. There's a subsidy there, but you still have to do those services like planning. No one pays for planning, but that's required by law. So I guess I get back to a lot of the things we're doing, are just, we're right now, everyone's wearing multiple hats and doing what's legally required. We're not doing a whole lot of exceptional stuff. And certainly with our existing revenue sources, there is not money to do exceptional stuff. And unfortunately, I think we're at the stage where exceptional stuff includes more police. Exceptional stuff includes, community center, rec programs. And for those, voters are going to have to make the decision that it's a priority for them.
I appreciate those comments, so thank you very much.
Okay, we are 20 minutes to the end of our currently scheduled time this evening, so I'm just providing that as a cautionary note. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, you are up next, and then Councilmember Keel.
Thank you, Mayor Bellisi. Appreciate that. And when I had my earlier comment, it was about being able to maintain the status quo. That without funding of this nature, we end up having to cut police and other services. And I think Eric did a good job of illustrating those details. Until we know that we have a stable future, it's hard for us to work beyond dealing with some of the other interests that the community has and of increasing services. We need to know we build on a strong base that isn't going to drop out from under us in 5 years or 10 years. And that's what this utility tax appears to offer for us. And if we head down that road, like I said, that is a very strong outcome, I believe, in order to build a certain future and have a sense that we can maintain current service levels. And it's only then that we can think about, well, how do we do these next things? After I get my eyes off of just being able to walk down the road, then I can start looking up to the horizon to see where I want to go. And that's sort of where I think we are. Eric, I did have one other question. It's just a simple question, frankly. I was just surprised to see the Transportation Benefit District reduction as a resolution as opposed to an ordinance, but there's a reason for that, I guess.
I'll let our city attorney speak to that.
Here's the reason why. Via the Transportation Benefit District fee in question, we have historically done by resolution. That has generally been the mode and operation of it. And to avoid implicating single subject line requirements for any council passed legislation, we had to split it into two.
Okay.
And part of it from a housekeeping measure is we'll send the resolution off to Department of Licensing, assuming that council were to act on it, has its own standalone.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I just had to ask because it wasn't what I expected, but you've helped me understand that. Thank you. I'm done.
Okay, Councilmember Keel.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Just real briefly, I view what this conversation is about it's about maintaining. We've all said that, and it's about police. I mean, if we don't do it, then we're gonna. And we've all said that, and I just wanted to underscore that. And I clicked my button before it was answered, but it's been answered. I think that is what we're doing. The other thing that I wanted to say is that the citizens, at least the many that I've talked to, campaigning, knocking on doors, and in grocery stores and all around, they expect us to do what's right by them, and that is, making sure that we have a police force, making sure the streets are right, and making sure all these things. But then, no one wants to pay anything more for it, and I think the reason why they don't want to pay is a lot of reasons, but the biggest reason is that I think there's a lack of trust on their part for us being able to do what is right by the money. And I think that, and when I say, what do you mean? Then they point to, history, they point to the town center. They point to all these things that have happened in the past. It says, that's why we don't trust you guys. And then going back to when I say, well, doggone it, we only have 9 cents out of the dollar. I mean, you got the school district and the fire, they got all this money out of the dollar. Well, and it's like, well, we trust them. Yeah, they told us what they're going to do with the money, and they did exactly what they said they were going to do, and we got the benefit for the dollar of what we spent. And they trust that they're going to say what they're going to do, and they trust that those people, those boards, those elected folks are looking after that business, not trying to look at everything else, but looking after that business. And I just, I really, my desire is that we get after and look after our business. And if we were to not pass this and we were to cut below, where we are, people say, oh yeah, we're not paying them up, but they would not be happy with this council and we would be saying, well, we didn't raise your taxes. We didn't say, they still would be even more mad at us. And I really would like for us to focus on our work, do the things we need to do to deliver the services, be able to explain it to people what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it, and really hold to our word on what it is that we're doing. And I think as people see that, I think they're going to be more open to the taxes, because I mean, everybody knows government runs on tax. I mean, it's not a business. Thank you.
All right. It appears that we are at the end of our conversation, unless there's some last minute comments or questions of staff at this time. Okay, not seeing any, I am going to adjourn our meeting this evening and thank all our council members for a lively discussion. So we are adjourned.
Good night.
Good night.